Welcome into the PFN Bengals podcast. I am Dallas Robinson. He is Jay Morrison. Jay, it's week one. Football is officially back. We've got a big show for you today. We're going to touch on Ja'Marr Chase. That is obviously the biggest story in Bengals land right now with week one approaching. We're also going to get into some of our season predictions and how we see this Bengals season playing out in 2024. And then we hope you'll stick around for our conversation with PFN Patriots beat writer Dakota Randall, who's going to give us all the inside intel on New England and how they stack up going into week one. Jay, there's a lot going on. Football's officially back. How are you doing in our first official regular season podcast edition? How are you doing today?
I'm great. I feel like we're finally here. We are towing the line. We're ready. We're waiting for the starting gun to go off. We're at what? There's ready, set, boom. I guess we're at set right now. So I've been ready. Now we're set. Let's get this thing going.
So the biggest story is Ja'Marr Chase in Bengals land, still not practicing.
Yeah.
He's practiced a couple times this summer, but he's still continuing his hold in. Zach Taylor keeps saying we'll take it day by day. It's so up in the air. It's far more up in the air than I think either of you or I thought this summer that it would be, whether Ja'Marr Chase is actually going to suit up in week one or not. We'll know tomorrow on Wednesday if he practices. I think that'll give us a pretty good idea of how things are going to look for Sunday. What's your take on where things stand? I mean, do you think Ja'Marr Chase is going to be on the field Sunday? Do you think we'll see him practicing this week? What's your take on where this whole situation is right now?
I don't know. I mean, it's so up in the air. I've said all along I expect him to play. That's the only leverage he has is to not play, and then it just goes completely away if he goes out there or he sits out and they win games anyhow. They win this game without Ja'Marr Chase, and so I think that's just a bad look if he doesn't play and then they win without him. And nobody's foolish enough to say that this team is going to be fine without Ja'Marr Chase, but. He does lose even more leverage if he doesn't play. But again, Wednesday's going to be a big day. Is he going to practice? And it's not just not getting a deal done. It's the manner in which like you could see if they were really close and they're hammering things out, and it's like it's a good faith thing, and he goes out and practices. But if it's not, and we really don't know, neither side says much at all, so we don't know how far apart they are. And if the Bengals have kind of given a, take it or leave it type offer and just refusing to come off of that number, I could see there'd be some hard feelings, and Ja'Marr would dig in a little more. But it's just been so weird with coming back to practice and then sitting back out again, and just the whole wanting an extension at this point when there's 2 years left on his deal. We've seen this last year. Burrow comes down to the Thursday before the opener. They get that one done. The AJ Green one in 2015. They're getting ready to go to the airport to fly to Oakland. That gets done. That one was a little different because AJ was going into his 5th-year option, and the last thing the Bengals wanted was for him to play the season without an extension and then get frustrated or whatever and just hit free agency, and then they have no shot. He's free to go and walk away. This is different. They know they've got Ja'Marr under contract another year after this one. I just don't think the Bengals feel the urgency right now, and it seems like it's going to take some concessions from Chase's camp, and I don't know where they're at, but the sense is that he wants to be the highest paid guy in the league. And he wants a lot of guaranteed money. I think the Bengals would be fine with making him the highest paid guy. Just put him a little bit over Justin Jefferson, even though he doesn't quite have the resume yet. That's just the way these stair-step increases go with position guys, with guys resetting the market at their position. It feels like the guaranteed money is the sticking point. And there's just no way to know what is exactly going to happen. I still don't feel confident that a deal is going to get done, but it does feel closer than maybe when this started. It started training camp where it just felt like, nah, it's probably going to be. I was almost certain it was going to be next spring or summer. Now, I'm not sure. I think there is a decent chance something happens, but the question of whether he's going to play or not is a good one, because even if a deal gets done, he hasn't practiced much. And I asked Zach Taylor about that yesterday. Could he play a full snap count? He said he couldn't. He can't say that for 100% certainty. You need to see where a guy's conditioning is once you get into the game and how much he's having to tap out and that type of thing. So there's so many questions with where Ja'Marr Chase stands right now.
Yeah, I think you're right that it doesn't really matter for week one. I think the Bengals can clearly beat the Patriots with or without Jamar Chase, but
Yeah.
it's just so interesting that it's gotten to this point, to the point where Jamar is making his kind of stand known by going out to practice in street clothes and making sure he walks in front of the cameras and kind of knowing he's going to put Zach Taylor in a bad position, right? By doing all that
Yeah.
and make him answer those questions. So it's very interesting that it's gotten to this point, and I'm right there with you. I don't know if a deal is going to get done or not. Jamar does not have the track record of a Justin Jefferson at this point in his career, but you're right. That's just how these contracts work in terms of leverage and in terms of the next guy in line. And whether the Bengals get there or not is an open question. Guarantee structure is always going to be a question for this team. The Bengals operate in a contract structure realm unlike any other team, really. They're not willing to go beyond certain years for guarantee structures. They obviously went against that with Joe Burrow. Do they put Jamar in that same class? Are they willing to kind of do things differently contract wise for him? We'll see. And whether he practices tomorrow, I think is huge. But you're right. Even if he does come back this week, is he going to get a full workload? I think the Bengals probably feel good enough about this week one situation that they wouldn't have to give him a full workload regardless of what happens. But it's such an odd situation. I think it's really strung itself out much farther than you or I thought that we'd be at this point. I think that we didn't necessarily think that a deal would be done at this point, but we thought that both sides would kind of think, okay, we'll put this forward until next offseason. We'll table this until next offseason. We'll get through this year and see where things are. And it just doesn't seem like Jamar's camp is willing to go through with that plan.
Yeah, and it's important to note too, you mentioned it, how different the Bengals are. And uh, Jamar's agent, Rocky Arson, has never dealt with the Bengals before in a contract like this. He's really he got Ezekiel Elliott. I think it was 5 years, 90 million a few years ago, and it was about 50 million guaranteed. It was a really good contract, but it's a whole different animal now, and every agent will tell you that it's completely different negotiating with the Bengals than it is with so many other teams. So they're kind of learning as they go as well. And the Bengals just rarely come off. They set a value and they stick to it. And there's really, as I said earlier, no urgency for them to get it done other than to make Jamar happy. But they've got a track record of that, of guys not being happy, and they find a way to smooth it over, and they play out the end of their deal. Jesse Bates and Jonah Williams and Trey and all these guys. T. Higgins even on the fifth year this year. It's just one of the, or not the fifth year, the franchise tag. It's just one of those things where they find a way to keep a guy happy. You hope they can do that with Jamar. If they don't get it done, the last thing you want is for him to be sullen and become an issue in the locker room for a team that has such high Super Bowl prospects.
Let's get into the team that has the Super Bowl prospects, and let's do our little season preview here and get some predictions off our chest before we get into week one. We got to do a little prognostication here and see how we think the season is going to turn out from a Bengals perspective. So we've got a lot of different categories here, a lot of superlatives we're going to roll through and just see how we think this 2024 season is going to play out for the Bengals. Let's start with some individual awards, Jay. I want to know if you think the Bengals are going to have any Pro Bowlers, any All Pros, any awards whatsoever next year when it comes time for NFL honors. Do you think the Bengals will get any of those postseason awards on the roster?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Pro Bowlers for sure.
Yes.
I think if Burrow stays healthy, he's going to be on there. Jamar's been on there every year, even if he sits out the first 4 games or whatever. He's. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl the year that he missed 4 games in a row with a broken hip. He can do that. He can overcome that. I think Trey Hendrickson is going to be a Pro Bowler again this year. Then for the first timers, I'm going to put 2 first timers on there. I'm going to put Geno Stone, the safety. He had the great year last year. He was second in the NFL with interceptions. If he has that kind of year again this year, which I think he might, the Bengals are going to have a good pass rush. They're going to have a solid back end. And I can see this team really being a ball hawking team. And I can see that's Geno's specialty. I could see him being right up there among the lead leaders again. You do that 2 years in a row, it's going to get noticed, and that's going to lead to a Pro Bowl vote. And then I think it's time for Evan McPherson. I expect him. I know it's hard to translate fantasy to real football, but I think he's going to be a top 3 fantasy kicker, and I think his time is going to come. It's hard because there's so many other good established kickers in the AFC, but I think he's going to have one of those seasons where he can't be denied and he can make it. And then Tyson Anderson, I will put in there as a special teams alternate, and I think CTB, I think Cam Taylor-Britt could be an alternate this year. I think he's going to be the guy next year that we're talking about, looking for the contract extension, and he really feels like he's on the come and rising. And I think this is going to be a big year for Cam Taylor. But again, to be a first-time Pro Bowler, sometimes it takes 2 good years in a row to really get the name recognition out there.
No, I absolutely. And I'm right there with you. I've got mostly the same list. I didn't have Geno Stone. That's a good call. I think that if he gets the same interception total and playing on a new team, same division, if the Bengals win the division, I do feel like he could be on there. But yeah, I had Burrow, Chase, Hendrickson. I'm right there with McPherson on you too. I do think he could be in his first Pro Bowl selection time. I don't have any All Pros. I mean, I feel like it's so hard. The All Pro list is so exclusive. I just don't see that. I do think Burrow could be in consideration for comeback player of the year, though. I do think that he'll be in that mix. The NFL kind of restructured the qualifications for that award, so it's more geared towards guys who are coming back from injury as opposed to just like off-field situations. Obviously, like Aaron Rodgers is going to be in that mix. Maybe Nick Chubb if he comes back, but I think Joe Burrow will be in that mix after missing so much time last year. And if he has a good season, if the Bengals play as well as we think, I think he could be in that comeback player of the year mix.
Yeah, I had him down as for the NFL passing leader this year. And if he's the NFL passing leader, he's going to be comeback player of the year. And I think Chubb, that was such a devastating injury that if he has a huge year, he's a really good bet. Rodgers, just because of the name recognition, but I don't know. Is he gonna have a great year? I had a fantasy draft on Sunday, and I got Aaron Rodgers in the 17th round, the 17th and final round. It's like he's just kind of a forgotten man, and you don't know how good that Jets offense is going to be. But I think Burrow is going to have a fantastic year, and he could be second team All Pro. But it's just hard to. I can't pick him to win MVP, and I can't pick him to be All Pro when he's in the same conference with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same for me. There's so many good quarterbacks. It feels wrong to pick out anybody really against Patrick Mahomes. Bengals Rookie of the Year. I'll go first on this one. I think I'm maybe a little off the board here. I'm going to go with Eric All. I think that I think we talked about this last week, by end of October, by November, I see a situation where Eric All is the tight end one on this team. He can play inline. He can play in the slot. He can block. He can pass catch. I know he missed a lot of time during the summer with injuries, but he's healthy. He's looked good in training camp. He's looked good in the preseason. I feel like he's the most complete tight end the Bengals have on this roster. And tight ends always take a while to develop, right? You have to get their feet wet. There's a lot going on with the transition from college to pros. But I feel like we get to November, December, I feel like Eric All is going to be taking the majority of those tight end snaps. And I really like the situation that he's set up in. And I think that he's going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, he starts camp on an injury list. You just look at that trajectory of what he's done already. And if this continues, he's gonna have a big year. And I don't know about the numbers, but this is our award. We're the only ones voting.
That's
and
right.
He is a big part of this. The numbers are almost secondary. If he's out there and he is a factor in the run game, which you expect him to be, and if his play leads them to go away from this super reliance on 11 personnel, and you see them move in more into the 12, and the running game takes the leap everyone expects, he's going to be a big part of that. So I like that pick a lot, but I have a hard time going away with Amarius Mims. He's going to be there. He's going to start. He's going to take over for Trent Brown at some point. It's not going to be Sunday. Zach Taylor already said that. It's going to be Trent Brown going against his former team in the Patriots, but it's coming. And maybe sooner rather than later. And again, that's if this run game, if this short yardage game in particular can take a big leap, he's going to be a big part of that. He's just such a massive man, and it's just going to be a massive impact as well. So I can't see them holding him out, and I really do think he's going to have a good year. It's something that they've been looking for, and Trent Brown's injury history, it just all lines up for him to be that guy that you say, okay, he's the Rookie of the Year, even if Eric All has a great season.
So that goes right into our next question: is when do you think Amarius Mims will take over as the starter? Trent Brown is going to be out there for week 1. Amarius Mims seems like he's getting back towards full health. Like when do you think he's going to take over at right tackle for Trent Brown?
Yeah, I think they would like to see 2 full weeks of practice before they would even consider getting him in there. And a lot of it depends on how Trent Brown plays. Like Amarius Mims could be back to full health and be looking great, but if Trent Brown's doing it and everything's fine, I think he could hold him off a little longer. I'm going to point to week 4 at Carolina. I'm not sure that he's quite going to be ready by week 3 against Washington, but I could see there maybe being some slight issues here and there with Trent Brown, and then that gives Amarius Mims 2 to 3 weeks to a full practice to get back in the flow and kind of reclaim what looked like. Looked like he was going to be the starter until he had the pec injury. So I think that feels like a good bet. I don't know that you would want to do it in week 5 and make his debut against a division opponent, a huge game like the Ravens. So working him in at a game like a Carolina, or kind of training wheels preseason type of game against a really poor team. I think that might be where we see him take over.
No, I think that makes sense. When I was on this question, I think I looked at it more of when is Trent Brown going to start to struggle, and when will the Bengals want to make that change? Do have a stretch here like week 5 against Baltimore. We don't know what that pass rush is going to look like. I think a lot of simulated pressures, and we'll see how Trent Brown handles that. The Giants, they've got Dexter Lawrence in the middle, but they added Brian Burns this offseason. They've got Kayvon Thibodeau. Week 7, we know what Myles Garrett is. I was a little farther down the schedule than you, Jay. I was thinking like week 8. Maybe Trent Brown struggles in this week 5 through 7 stretch and maybe gives up a few pressures. Maybe that's when Zach Taylor says we need to get Mims in there. But I do think it could come earlier. I think Mims is just obviously an incredibly talented player. Trent Brown, I hate to say it, but his injury history is so concerning that he really could get nicked up or banged up at any moment. And if that happens, if he comes out and even misses a few series, I think there's a situation where that's it, where Mims goes in, picks up a few plays because Brown is nicked up, and Brown never gets back in the lineup. I could absolutely see a situation like that. But yeah, I had it a little bit later in the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mims gets in really at any point. And I think once he does get in there, it's hard to see him giving that up, barring an injury.
Yeah.
Next question here. Which player who's not a part of the starting 22 is going to play the most snaps? So the way we looked at this is we considered Zach Moss the starting running back. We're considering 11 personnel, so 3 wide receivers with Gesicki on the field, and nickel personnel with Mike Hilton in the slot. So if we're assuming those are the 22 starters, Jay, aside from that group, who do you think is going to play the most snaps aside from that starting 2022?
Yeah, I think it would be Chase Brown, because I think the ideal scenarios for those guys to be about 50-50. And so if we're not going to list him as part of the starting 22, I think he's a really good bet for that. If I go on the defensive side, I think it might be Joseph Osai, because you figure he's going to be a part of the third down package. And if he can continue his trajectory of what he's looked like this offseason, this preseason, maybe he moves Sam Hubbard inside on some early downs, or maybe he gets some full series by himself and they rest Sam Hubbard, or they rest Trey Hendrickson, and try to keep those guys fresher as part of a rotation. So I think Joseph Osai is a guy that you're going to see really get a lot of snaps this year.
Yeah, I like both of those choices. I had them both on my list. I went with Chris Jenkins. I think that he is just so solidly the number 3 defensive tackle on this team, and they need the help. They need the help on the interior with McKinley Jackson injured. I do think Joseph Osai is going to play a lot of snaps at the beginning of the year. I wonder what it looks like when Myles Murphy gets back, like whether his snaps get reduced a little bit. Chase Brown, I do think there's a chance that, kind of like we talked about with Mims, that maybe he's so explosive and so impressive in his limited reps, if he's splitting reps early on, that maybe he just takes over as the true RB1 going on. He's handled that workhorse role in college before. It's not like he can't do it. But I think it's Chris Jenkins for me. I just think that, Zach Carter played 500 defensive snaps last season. And I think that there is a spot there for a guy like Chris Jenkins, especially on passing downs, to get a lot of work in his rookie year. And I didn't pick him as my rookie of the year, even though I think he's going to play the most snaps. I don't know that Chris Jenkins is going to be a superstar from day one, but I definitely think he will be counted on as the third member of that defensive tackle rotation.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think he's only going to get better. Marion Hobby talked about how he still gets himself into some bad situations and he's strong enough to get out of them. And once he really starts getting the technique part down and stops getting in those bad situations, then his playing time could skyrocket.
Let's move over to the coaching staff. You know, we saw Brian Callahan get a head coaching this offseason, head coaching job after years as the Bengals offensive coordinator. The Bengals had some coaching staff turnover for the first time in a long time. Looking forward to next offseason, Jay, is there a coach on this staff that you think is going to be due a promotion, whether that's on the Bengals staff, whether that's head coaching interest, maybe coordinator interest from somewhere else? Is there a coach on the Bengals staff that you're pinpointing to be in the news next offseason?
Yeah, I just think if you can coach quarterbacks in this league, you've got a future. And Dan Pitcher was Burrow's quarterbacks coach since he got here, and now he's offensive coordinator. And we've seen guys make this leap. You know, Dave Canales 1 year as a play caller, and he gets a head coaching job. And Bobby Slowick was a hot commodity this year after just 1 year as a OC in Houston. So if this Bengals offense plays the way I think we all expect them to, now both those guys were play callers, and Pitcher's not going to be, but it didn't. It might have taken a little longer for Brian Callahan to do it, but. I think Pitcher, he's just so bright. If he gets in and gets interviews, he's going to win over some GM or some owner and be in line for that kind of promotion. And then outside of him, I think Troy Walters is a guy that's poised to be an offensive coordinator in the league sometime. If Jamar sits out a few games and you got to deal with that situation, you got to deal with trying to bring Jermaine Burton along. And if you see those kind of this offense flourish and the wide receivers be as big a part of it as we expect them to be, I think it could finally be Troy Walters' time for a promotion and start getting some OC interviews.
No, I think those are great. And I think you had mentioned that when, Callahan was getting hired in Tennessee and when Pitcher was taking interviews elsewhere, that Troy Walters very much would have been in that mix for OC had Dan Pitcher gone elsewhere. So he's definitely on the list as well. We'll toss out Lou Anarumo. Who knows if he's ever going to be in the mix again, but maybe if the Bengals defense shows a huge improvement this year and he mixes in a lot of good young players and gets back to that creativity we've seen in the past, maybe he gets mixed in. I want to toss out Justin Riscotti. I think he had a good track record as an assistant OL coach with the Vikings. If the Bengals defense looks a lot different this year, and you can attribute a lot of those changes to a new voice like Riscotti, I think he be in the mix for OC jobs around the league. Last one I would mention, Charles Burks, cornerbacks coach for the Bengals. I think he's done a pretty good job through his time here. Turned him in a really good starting corner. If Dax Hill thrives as an outside corner, having never played that position really at any full-time basis in college or the pros, I think Charles Burks is going to get a lot of credit if Dax Hill does that in year one. If Josh Newton has to play and step in the slot maybe for Mike Hilton, I think he'll get a lot of credit for that. Charles Burks worked with Xavier Howard with the Dolphins during his best season when he was a Pro Bowler and led the league in interceptions. So I think if we're looking for a young defensive guy who could be in the DC mix, maybe gets a couple interviews next year, I would throw Charles Burks into that mix.
Yeah, I love that pick. He's a young up and comer, and he's another one of those guys. When you talk to him, it's just an impressive way he comes across. And I give the Bengals credit for that. The way that they make all of these assistants available to the media. And I know doing interviews with the media is totally different than interviewing for jobs, but I definitely think it helps. It's a kind of a practice run of thinking on your feet. It's not like they want the questions submitted in advance. And these guys are just, they're so smart in the way they talk. They don't speak in coach speak and cliches a lot. They really have great insight that they're willing to share. And I like the Burks pick a lot. I think he could be very quickly DC in this league.
I think it speaks to Zach Taylor. I think he's done a wonderful job of cultivating this coaching staff and like grooming coaches to eventually take jobs elsewhere. And we talked about this when Brian Callahan got a job. It speaks to the coaching staff, and it's good for the coaching staff. You want guys to get promotions. You want guys to have that growth mindset. And I would not be surprised if a couple of these younger coaches are in that mix for promotions next season.
I will say real quick, yeah. I think that was one of the things that Marvin Lewis did really well too.
Agreed.
He made all those guys available, and then you see it with Mike Zimmer and Hugh Jackson and Jay Gruden, and those guys went on and got head coaching jobs, came from here, and it's kind of been a part of it goes back to Bengals ownership and the media relations department about wanting to do that, but part of it goes to the head coach too. The head coach could shut those kind of things down, and a lot of them do. You're not allowed to talk to the assistant coaches anytime you want. There might be a schedule where everybody gets them at once, but it's a free for all with the Bengals media. You have to request it in advance, but you really, any day that you want, you can ask to talk to an assistant coach, and probably 9.5 times out of 10, they will grant that interview.
Let's take one more look towards next offseason. If we look towards the 2025 NFL draft, what position do you think the Bengals are most likely to take in round one? We don't know where that pick will fall. Hopefully for Bengals fans, it's later in round one. What position do you think the Bengals would use that round one pick on, Jay?
Well, everybody's going to be big mad if I say anything but 32, but I can't predict 32. I'm going to say 26, which,
Okay.
if you're doing the quick math in your head, that's a loss in the divisional round. I know that's not going to make a lot of people happy, but until we see the run game look better, until we see the defense, until we see the run defense, yes, we expect all that stuff to be better, but until we actually see it happening in front of our eyes, I just think it's too optimistic to expect them just to be right back in an AFC Championship game this year. So I'm gonna go with 26 and an unfortunate loss in the divisional round.
Okay. I'm now realizing I didn't make this question clear enough, because I was thinking more of like what position on the field will they be drafted?
Oh, okay. Well, forget
So
that, everybody. Maybe I do say 32.
No, I like that too. Here, I'm gonna give you mine. I think mine will be I think they'll take an edge rusher. I think that you've got Sam Hubbard coming near the end of his contract. Trey Hendrickson's had his contract troubles with the Bengals. Miles Murphy, still don't know what he's going to be. He's going to be missing the first couple games this season. Joseph Ossai is going to be a free agent. Cam Sample, injured free agent. I know they just took Miles Murphy 2 years ago, but I think that's a position they're going to have to restock. And I think there are other positions the Bengals love to spend first-round picks on that could be in the mix. But I think if we're looking at it right now, I think they'll want to add another first-round edge rusher to the mix.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the 2-3 premium positions in the league, and you're just not going to be able to afford it in free agency. You're going to have to go get those guys early in the draft, and I'd frankly be surprised if it's any other position besides that. Maybe wide receiver if Higgins leaves and Burton doesn't develop the way they expected. But I sitting here right now and expecting Burton to at least make some sort of improvement and a Chase deal to get done before. Yeah. Well, even if it doesn't get done before next year's draft, they know it's going to get done. So I go edge rusher first and wide receiver second, and then after that, I mean, it's probably 90% that's going to be one of those two.
I maybe corner, depending on how Dax Hill plays, and if Cam Taylor-Britt, how he plays, maybe, and just because the Bengals love taking first round corners, but I would say edge and receiver were the two I was kind of locked in on as well. Okay, let's get into our statistical and record kind of predictions here for the Bengals. First one we're going to do is final DVOA rank on offense and defense. So if you're not familiar with DVOA, it's FTN Fantasy. It's Aaron Schatz, who we had on our show a few weeks ago. It's just a good advanced under the hood metric to look at offense and defense production versus the league average. Bengals were 11th in offensive DVOA in 2023, which is still impressive when you look back at how the Bengals were playing without Joe Burrow. I have them doing better, obviously, this season. I have them at 6th in the offensive DVOA. I think there's a lot of good offenses. We've done our offensive rankings here at PFN. There's a lot of impressive offenses and quarterbacks, but I just love all the pieces the Bengals have together. I love what they did this offseason. And if Joe Burrow stays healthy, I don't see any reason they won't be a top 10 unit. And 6 just feels right to me.
I'm right there with you. I went 5. Excellent. It just feels like top 5 offense. And I could see them being even a little higher. But I go back to, I think they're going to be in the lead in a lot of these games in the fourth quarter, and maybe it becomes more of a grind out the clock, playing smarter football instead of constantly being in that attack mode. So I'd be stunned, barring major injury. I think this is a top 5 offensive team, and I went right at the limit there at 5.
Defense, they were 23rd last season, which is actually better than you might think, given how many big plays the Bengals gave up. And where do you have them on defense? Do you have them improving next season?
Yeah, by quite a bit. I'm cut in half, basically. I have them as a top 12. I couldn't quite go top 10. But yeah, I've got them at number 12. And I think anybody would be thrilled with that, to have number 5 DVOA offense and a number 12 DVOA defense. That's going to spell great success.
Yeah, I put him at 16, so like right in the middle. It's defensive performance. I feel like you can really improve year over year. Offense, I feel like is pretty sticky year to year, but defense, there can be some huge swings in performance. And we have all Bengals fans know if they can clean up the explosive play rate, clean up the communication in the back end, get a little more pressure, I do think that they'll kind of just naturally regress back to the middle of the pack. And if Big Lou can do his scheming that he usually does on Sundays and finally gets that veteran savvy in the back end, I do think that there's a chance that maybe this is a surprise top 10 unit and gets back to where they've been in the past. And that wouldn't totally surprise me. Final record for the Bengals. This is the big one, Jay. What do you have? We did our schedule prediction. Was it 3 months ago at this point, game by game predictions? What do you have as the Bengals' final 2024 regular season record?
Yeah, I'm sticking to what I had back then. I'm going to go 11-6. I think you have to. The AFC North is so good that you almost have to kind of stick with the baseline of 3-3. I mean, his team was 0-5 in games that mattered last year against the conference. You can't do that again. I don't think they'll do that again, but I think it's too much to ask for 6-0, 5-1, maybe 4-2. Pittsburgh could really fall off this year. But even in bad years, the Bengals you typically find a way to split with Pittsburgh, if not get swept. So you go 3-3 in the division, then you're talking about 8-3 in the other games, which seems fair. So it's just, yeah, I really do think they have a shot to get higher. Vegas has it at 10.5. They're usually pretty dead on. I think 11-6 seems like a fair mark for them to hit.
I'm right there with you. I had 11-6 when we did our season predictions, and I'm going to stick with that too. I do think that's going to be enough for them to win the AFC North this season. I think that even though it's a very tough division, I feel like all 4 teams will kind of fight each other, and they'll all be in the mix till the end. But I think that if I'm looking at these 4 teams, I still have the Bengals number 1. I think Baltimore lost enough this offseason, including defensive coordinator Mike McDonald and some key pieces on that defense. Cleveland, I just have too many worries about Deshaun Watson. For as much as I love the rest of the roster, I just can't feel confident about them with Deshaun under center. And it's a similar situation in Pittsburgh where you like most of that roster, even if you like what new play caller Arthur Smith is going to do. It's Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and neither one of them necessarily took that starting quarterback job by the horn. That feels like Russell kind of won it by default. It's really hard if you dive into their numbers and how they've played over the couple of seasons to get excited about how that offense is going to look. It really is. So for me, I think if I'm looking at how this AFC North is going to play out, I've got it Cincinnati as the first place team, Baltimore in second, Cleveland in third, and Pittsburgh in fourth.
So where do you have what seed 1 through 4 among the division winners are you going to put them at?
Okay, so if I'm doing the AFC playoff seeding, I still have Kansas City number 1. I mean, I feel like you can't pick against Mahomes. I'm going to go with CJ Stroud and the Texans number 2. I have the Bengals as number 3 seed. So definitely right there in the mix with the other elite AFC teams. I've got Buffalo at number 4. And then my wildcard teams, I've got Baltimore at number 5, Colts at 6, Jets at 7. So I'm leaving the Dolphins out. I'm leaving the Jaguars out. I'm leaving the Browns out. Steelers, sorry, Steelers fans. But that's the 7 who I see. And I think the Dolphins could be right there in the mix, obviously, too. And there are other teams that could be in the mix, but those are the 7 that I have right now. Who do you have?
Yeah, I had KC 1, Buffalo 2. I've got the Ravens winning the division, so that they're the 3, and Houston is the 4. I can see them. They're like kind of everybody's darling this year. And
they are.
It's hard to match those expectations sometimes. But I do think they have enough to win the division. And I had Miami as the number 5 wild card, and the Bengals at 6. And then I've got Jacksonville. I do. I think that's a team that doesn't have a that rough of a schedule, and it's particularly hard early. So if they can get through the early part, it frees up pretty nicely for them. They have 14th easiest schedule overall. I just think Trevor Lawrence seems like he's on the come. Good coaching. They feel poised to maybe even challenge Houston for that conference or for that division title. And then the one thing I'll say about the Bengals, and you've got them win the division, I've got them as the wild card. If they go to Kansas City and win in week 2, all bets are off. I'm flipping it because there's a great shot at them being 4-0 going into the Baltimore game, and you get that kind of momentum early. you could really see this thing snowball and this just being an unstoppable force. And then 4-0 rolling into Baltimore, you figure out a way to beat them at home, and you're 5-0. You already got a 1-0 mark in the division. It's there for them, but until you see it, I've got to go 11-6 wild card.
So where do you have the Bengals finishing in the playoffs? I debated whether we even wanted to talk about this because the playoffs are such a crapshoot, right?
Yeah.
Anything in playoffs, like I'll stand by my regular season predictions more than I will my playoff predictions once it finally comes in. But I think it is fair to say where we think they're going to finish in the postseason.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got them at 6, which means a wild card game at Baltimore, and I've got them winning that one. You beat that, more than likely Jacksonville's going to fall, so that means the Bengals are the lowest remaining seed, and then it's a divisional round trip to Kansas City, and I can't pick them in that game. Even though they've won in Kansas City before, and obviously a huge game in the AFC Championship game. So that's what I've got, another road win in the wild card round, and then losing to Kansas City in the divisional round.
I've got them advancing to the AFC title game against the Texans and losing to the Texans. CJ Stroud, man, he's just so good. It's amazing watching some of his tape from last year, and I really think he's set up for like a 50 touchdown season. I think it's going to be tough for the rest of the conference to get past Houston. They're kind of the team that I'm going with this year. As much as I would love to see the Bengals obviously advance to another Super Bowl, I do think they might come up just a bit short. But anything can happen in the playoffs, right? That's why we love the playoffs.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. Let's do one more that's not Bengals related. We want to give you a surprise Super Bowl team. I looked at the odds, and I want to look at teams who are plus 4,000 or better on Vegas Insider. My pick for this, and I think this is the team that is my dark horse favorite throughout the NFL this year, Seattle Seahawks. I just love what they're doing this offseason. They hired Mike McDonald from Baltimore. I think they have so many good defensive pieces with Devon Witherspoon. They drafted Byron Murphy this year. I think that defense is going to be so underrated. And then on offense, you bring in Ryan Grubb from Washington Huskies, who took him then to the national championship with Michael Penix, an amazing set of wide receivers. You bring that offense to Seattle with Geno Smith and those receivers. They are my dark horse team this year in terms of one team that's really far down the odds that could get to the Super Bowl. I know it's not Bengals related, but if we're tossing out one Super Bowl dark horse, that is my selection.
Yeah, I mean, my dark horse, I didn't even pick them to make the playoffs ahead of this, but I can see it happening. It's the Chargers. I mean, all Jim Harbaugh does is win, and it's not like he's taken over a team just void of talent. I mean, he's got an incredible talent in Justin Herbert. They've got dudes on defense. I think he can turn that thing around in a hurry, and they're in a division where, the Chiefs are there, but I could see him sweeping the Raiders and the Broncos, and that 4 wins right off the bat there. And who knows, even the Chiefs could be due for a fall. You just can't keep having Patrick Mahomes be Superman all the time. And Kelsey's getting older, and it's not a wide receiver core that wows you. Worthy might be something special, but he is a rookie. So I could see the Chargers really being a surprise team this year and making some hay. And you get them in the playoffs, like I said, a coach like Harbaugh who knows how to win big games can go a long way.
No, I agree. I mean, you've got head coach figured out. You've got quarterback figured out. Pretty solid offensive line. I mean, that's 3 strong pieces. Jim Harbaugh has just had instant success like everywhere he goes. It's incredibly hard to bet against. So even if you don't like the receivers or you don't like the secondary in Los Angeles, it really is hard to bet against Jim Harbaugh. So I love that pick too. That is our Bengals season preview. I hope you'll stick around. We're going to bring in Dakota Randall, who is our PFN Patriots reporter. He does a great job covering New England. Got a lot of questions for him. They've got a rookie quarterback situation who's obviously not going to play in Drake May. Jacoby Brissett is going to be starting. It's an interesting opponent, I'll say, for week 1. I think going in and playing against New England Patriots in their first game post Bill Belichick. I think it's going to be a very interesting game and an interesting conversation. So I hope you stick around for that. We'll bring that right up next with Dakota Randall. Joining us now is Pro Football Network's Patriots beat reporter, Dakota Randall. Dakota, thank you so much for joining the show today. Are you as ready for week 1 as we are?
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. I'm kind of a weird football writer or football fan in that I'm not like sitting here like counting down the hours to the start of the football season. I very much cling on to summer for dear life and would like to stay on the beach as long as possible and keep putting off the the long hours of the football season. But a part of me absolutely is ready to get going, so we actually have real football to talk about.
I can't be on the beach because Jamar Chase could sign at any minute, so I might as well just sit at my computer and get ready for the season to start.
Yeah, well, you could bring the laptop, but it would potentially overheat. So.
You can get those Twitter notifications anywhere. You can get those on the beach, right?
Right.
Let's talk about week one a little bit. I mean, I think it's safe to say there's a pretty big talent gap between the Cincinnati Bengals and the New England Patriots going into week one. But I think this is still a fascinating game from a number of angles. I think what we have to start with is the Patriots quarterback situation. Gerard Mayo announced that Jacoby Brissett is going to be the starter for the Patriots in week one over Drake May, who was a number 3 overall pick. Dakota, you watched both of these quarterbacks all summer long through all the preseason. You've seen every rep they've taken. Why did the Patriots go with Jacoby Brissett over Drake May? Is Brissett giving the Patriots something that Drake May isn't right now, or was it just veteran deference?
Yeah, it's tough. First of all, I'm not at all surprised that it was Jacoby Brissett. I don't think this ever was truly a quarterback competition. I know Gerard Mayo acted like it was and said things that made the public feel like it was, but it was a very different story on the practice field where Drake May really never repped with the starters. He saw very few meaningful reps with the starters, and those were all towards the end of camp. I think maybe the rhetoric that ramped up towards the end from Mayo himself was maybe to, kind of motivate Drake, make him think he could win the job and see how he'd respond. And to his credit, he did respond well. He played the best that he did all summer. But I think, this was always going to be Jacoby Brissett from day one. I think they always plan on him being the starter and giving Drake May a longer development, especially after watching what happened with Mac Jones. And the reasons for that are pretty simple. Number one, Drake May still is very raw and has a lot of things to work on. This is a guy who operated his entire college career, which was a short college career, out of shotgun, never played under center, never called plays out of the huddle. He's still very raw in those areas. His footwork issues that everybody talks about especially pop up when he's operating under center. That could be a bad combination when you have a bad offensive line, of course. And so, I think he has those things to work on. And Jacoby Brissett, he has firsthand experience in Alex Van Pelt's West Coast offense. And I think he has more tools in his toolbox to help protect himself if the offensive line is having issues and adjusting protections and all those sort of things to sort of manage the game if things get out of hand up front. Whereas Drake May doesn't have those tools in his toolbox yet. And if he does start facing relentless pressure, that's how you start regressing and losing all the strides you'd made in footwork and all the other things that he needs to work on from a fundamental level. So I just don't think he's ready to play quite yet. And I think Jacoby Brissett just is the most logical choice, and he was always going to be the week one starter.
Yeah, based on that answer, I think you kind of answered what my next question was going to be was, how long or how short is the leash on Brissett? Could you envision any scenario where he plays poorly enough against the Bengals to get pulled? It doesn't sound like that's probably the case. So maybe the follow-up before you even give the initial answer would be, where does that leash, at what point in the season could you see them turning to May?
Yeah, I think as far as this game, the only way I see Drake May playing is in garbage time one way or the other. If it's so bad and the game's out of hand, and they just pulled Jacoby Brissett for the fourth quarter and just give Drake May some exposure, just have him hand the ball off a bunch and practice in a real game environment. And as far as in season, I think the timeline certainly moved up from where it was. Like if you asked me that question 3 weeks ago, I would have leaned toward him not playing until after the week 14 bye or potentially sitting down the entire season. I still think both of those options are on the table, but he was that much better over the last few weeks where now, I don't think he plays in the first four. I don't think they want to put him up against the Jets in primetime on the road against that defense. I don't think they want to put him up against the San Francisco 49ers defense. Those are recipes for disaster, but the schedule softens a little bit after that. You get the Dolphins twice, at least from a defensive standpoint. You get the Dolphins twice. You get the Titans. Some other I think the Jaguars are in there. So good teams, but not the Niners, right? And so I think that's the spot where maybe, we get into October. If Brissett's playing very poorly and it's just the season's going nowhere, maybe they turn to Drake May then, but I still think it depends how things look on the offensive line. It would have to have stabilized by that point for him to be put in there.
Yeah, the Patriots have the most difficult schedule in the league by Pro Football Network strength of schedule metrics. So it kind of gives an interesting situation, right? Like, is this offense going to be so bad that the calls for Drake May, what they won't be able to deny putting him there, or is this slate so difficult that Gerard Mayo doesn't want to put Drake May out there, that the weapons, the offensive line are so bad that he's trying to protect May and almost use Jacoby as just a way to get through the year and not let Drake get in there and kind of, I don't want to say get ruined, but take the hits, play this awful defense with a bad supporting cast, and where does that leave him at the end of the year?
Well, I mean, and that kind of gets, we'll eventually get into more about my feelings on the Patriots and whether they are as bad as everyone thinks they are. But I've said this throughout the offseason. I don't think the schedule is quite as tough as all the rankings would lead you to believe it is. On paper, sure, but the games aren't played on paper, and I think timing is a huge part of every NFL schedule. Mm-hmm. Logistics, when you're getting a team, and I think a lot of those things did break in the Patriots' favor. Certainly, the opponents are tough, but as far as the Bengals, I would much rather get them in Week 1 than the back half of the season. Mm-hmm. Ditto for the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, 40 years old, coming off a torn Achilles. A team that I just don't trust at all. Are they really firing on all cylinders in Week 3? Probably not, let alone that it's a Thursday night game, which typically in a divisional matchup at that, a lot of those times those games are kind of close and ugly. And then it kind of comes down to what you believe in or what you think about the Bills, who I'm not as high on as some other people. They get the Colts at home, who, again, I need to see more from Anthony Richardson. There's just a lot of sort of wild card games for the Patriots that I don't think they certainly could end up being as difficult as they are on paper, but I could also see it going the other way. And a lot of those games are also at home. So I don't think the schedule is quite that tough, but certainly on paper by opponents, it does look daunting.
So this New England offense, what should Bengals fans be expecting? What is this offensive scheme going to look like when they come in here Sunday? Because we know Brissett doesn't often put the ball in jeopardy. Is this going to be a game managing situation? They're going to be a run first team that you hardly see anymore, or what should Bengal fans be looking for on Sunday?
Yeah, certainly it's not going to be exciting, but I do think it could be more, the bar's low, but more exciting than what we saw the last couple of years from Patriots offenses. Because it's
very low, as low as it can get.
And the bar, again, and this bar too is low, but from a talent perspective, I think there's more talent on offense than there's been arguably at any point post Tom Brady. The only one that would be in that conversation is 2021. But I think in hindsight, that was not a very good offensive staff or personnel either. So I think as far as scheme, I mean, it's Alex Van Pelt's offshoot of the West Coast offense. It's very timing, passing oriented, quick passes, a lot of running. I mean, it's going to be a lot of Ramondre Stevenson, a ton of Antonio Gibson. I mean, that's one thing I'm very confident in for the Patriots this year is that if he stays healthy, Antonio Gibson's going to be very busy. He definitely gives them their best passing down back since James White blew out his hip. I think he's going to get a lot of work. It's a lot of outside zone running and a lot of play action off of those looks. So it's going to be a lot of, again, outside zone runs, and then they take their shots running play action off of that. And they have some interesting receivers who could allow them to hit on those plays more than they have the last couple of years. Both rookies, especially Jalen Polk, I think is going to play a lot and be an immediate contributor. Javon Baker is more boomer bust. He looks exactly like the Patriots version of Gabe Davis. And then, they have, I think, their best tight end room in a while, with Hunter Henry still just kind of being Hunter Henry, which is a good tight end. And Austin Hooper, I think, is a better option for them or a better fit for them than Jonnu Smith ever was. Not saying he's a better player, but he's a better fit. So don't be surprised if the Patriots, if they find success running the ball, and I mean, Jay, you could speak more to the Bengals run defense than I could, but if the Patriots, don't take a lot of sacks, don't commit a bunch of penalties, and they have success on early downs, I wouldn't be, don't be surprised, Bengals fans, if they move the ball more and score a few more points than you might expect.
Yeah, I mean, run defense is the big question for this team, and the guy they drafted to kind of put the finger in the dike is injured and on injured reserve in McKinley Jackson. So it's something where that could really shrink the game and make it interesting if they have success. The Bengals just got gashed last year against the run. Everybody thinks about all the explosive plays they gave up on offense, but stopping the run was a big reason they were 0-5 in the division. So I could definitely see that giving them problems.
Yeah, there are a couple of interesting
again, not to cut you off, Dallas, but again, that comes down to that just comes down to also to what version of the Patriots offensive line are we getting? And that's really the biggest variable here is, have they corrected everything they need to correct over the last 2 weeks? And if so, I think they got a shot in this game. If they haven't, they won't go very far, right?
I want to get into the offensive line with you next. I do want to say Alex Van Pelt, connections to the Bengals. He was the quarterback's coach here a little bit. Am I wrong? He has not called offensive plays since I think like 2009, right? With the Bills. I think that was the last time. So it's such a mystery box, I think. Is it going to look like what Alex Van Pelt was doing with Cleveland last year under Kevin Stefanski? Yes. Is it going to be, it is still a little bit of a mystery box, even though we do kind of have a sample of what it might look like. And I think the Patriots weapons kind of remind me of what Joe Burrow had at the beginning of his career, right? Ramondre's a little bit of a Joe Mixon type. He can do everything. DeMario Douglas is kind of like a Tyler Boyd weapon in the slot. Jalen Polk can maybe be like the T. Higgins rookie year performance that Joe Burrow got. I'm kind of with you that I think that this is an interesting group of weapons. Whether they're going to all mesh together in week one against the Bengals is up in the air, but it's the talent increase, the baseline talent increase from where they've been last year, the year before. I think you're absolutely right. It's just amazing where they are compared to last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, for the Patriots, I think the floor is as low as basically everybody's been saying. But I think the ceiling is certainly higher than a lot realize. And of course, I mean, that's, why would people believe that the offense could exceed expectations, right? And the last two times we've seen them, they've been catastrophically bad. And it's not like everybody was watching them throughout the summer, right? And they're putting a lot of trust in a lot of rookies, a lot of young players, really a lot of inexperience on both sides of the ball. But the talent has absolutely increased. And as far as the offensive line that you were getting to, I think the Patriots have the bones of a good above average offensive line. The problem is, the group that I think they want to roll with, the five-man lineup, hasn't had a lot of time together because of either injuries or they were just tinkering with lineups too often throughout the summer. They didn't really settle on the group that they should have settled on early until really like the last week of the preseason. So are they going to be able to solve those issues over the final 2 weeks before week one? I would say maybe, or yes, if it was Dante Scarnecchia coaching, but it's not him. It's Scott Peters, who I think it looked like he was doing a good job this summer, but we just don't know, right? So that's you're making a guess if you say that he's going to be able to make those corrections. We just don't know. But I think, if you're a Patriots fan, you feel good about David Andrews at center. I still think he's one of the best in the game, even though he's probably lost a step. You feel good about Mike Nwenu, whether he's at right guard or right tackle. You feel good about Sidy So. He's at least starting caliber. He's hurt right now. We don't know if he's going to play in this game. That could be a big deal. But he's starting caliber. And then Layden Robinson, the rookie fourth rounder, I mean, you could argue he was their best offensive lineman all summer. And I think he's gonna start right away. And I think he has a chance to be really good. And then at right tackle, whether it's Nwenu, whether it's Chukwuekorfor, who played well at right tackle when he played last season. He's not much of a left tackle. Whether it's those two or the rookie third rounder, Caden Wallace, I think you can feel good that right tackle is going to figure itself out. And so if they stabilize at those four spots, you can manage a hole at left tackle in multiple ways. What you can't manage is when you're bad at both tackles or if you're also bad in the middle. So again, we're just going to have to see what it looks like in week one. But we would be guessing if we said, it's going to have stabilized by then, because we just don't know that.
Yeah, Bengals fans know all about the no donkeys approach on the offensive line. You cannot have that one big hole, because a team will find it and they will exploit it. I guess the best friend of this offense this year is going to be the defense, and the defense was great last year. Do you see improvement this year, and where does the pressure come from this year with Judon gone? Because I remember the Senior Bowl when the Bengals coached it, Uche was I believe he was defensive MVP, but he was all over the field. And he was just a guy that I didn't really know that much about. I know he just stood out. Is he the guy that's going to get a lot of the pressure this year with Judon gone?
So I would say, first of all, for the Patriots, the bigger loss isn't Matthew Judon. It's definitely Christian Barmore. I think, or just because, we can argue which one's the better player. I'd probably lean Barmore, but regardless, it's just they're more equipped to withstand the loss of Judon than they are Barmore. They don't really have anybody who can replace him. Javon Godchaux is a good run defender. Daniel Akwale is a good sub rusher. But Christian Barmore is the total package, right? And we've seen what some of the upper echelon defensive tackles can do to a game. And he had that ability. And so without him, he was diagnosed with blood clots. We don't know if he's going to play at any point this season. So that's a huge loss for them. But as far as just directly replacing Judon's production, I think that's going to come from Keon White. Sometimes he plays with his hand in the dirt. Sometimes he stands up. But regardless, he was probably their best player throughout training camp. He was excellent last summer too. And then like any rookie in a Bill Belichick defense, it took a while for him to see increased snaps. It's not uncommon for, I think people to sort of forget about Patriots rookie defenders because they often don't play as rookies. It's very rare. And so they kind of get overlooked. But he's someone who came on as the season, progressed and towards the end of the year when nobody was watching them. And he's excellent he was excellent in practice throughout the summer. And so I think he's their top breakout star this year. Like that's the guy who I think the reason they were comfortable trading Matthew Judon is because I think he can replace maybe not 16 sacks, but he has that in him eventually as a player. And then, I think the other one for them is Anthony Jennings, who he doesn't have a lot of pass rushing upside, but he probably sets the best edge on the team. And he sees a ton of snaps because of that. He's excellent against the run. He's very physical, so he's going to play a lot. And so for Josh Uche, who you mentioned, he's a fascinating player because 2 years ago, he broke out and had, I think, 12 sacks. And last year, it went down to like 3. He also kind of battled injuries a little bit. But really, the story for him is he just hasn't been on the field much. It's been just solely on like third down and passing scenarios that they put him in there. The question is was that a Bill Belichick thing? Or is Gerard Mayo going to continue that? Or is Gerard Mayo going to play Josh Uche more often? He also battled an injury a little bit during the summer, but I think he's healthy now. So if they unleash Josh Uche, so to speak, and let him play as much as he did 2 years ago, he could see huge sack totals, but I have no idea if he's going to play as much as he did then because he just hasn't in a while.
Who are you most excited to watch on this roster? If we take Drake May out of the equation, because I think he's probably the easiest answer, is there a guy on this roster that you just can't wait to see what they do this year? They've got Polk and Baker, the interesting young wide receivers. You mentioned Keon White, who, man, I remember watching him last preseason, like you mentioned, just an absolute exhibition season superstar. I remember him just destroying offensive tackles in the run game last year. Christian Gonzalez was outstanding in 4 games last year. He's back from injury. Is there one of these young guys that like you cannot wait to see what they produce in 2024?
Yeah, I think Jalen Polk is the player, right? And he's just a huge domino for them. If they hit on that pick, I don't think it wipes out the need for a number one receiver, but it certainly makes you feel a lot better about where they are from an offensive personnel standpoint. I think I've kind of likened him to a souped up Jacoby Myers. He's same kind of player, runs similar routes. He's very smart, very good hands. But he's a little bit faster, a little bit bigger, just a little more upside. And he was seeing starters reps by the end of camp. I think he's really good. I think he's going to be a really good player for them. He's the one that I would go with. The other one is Javon Baker, the 4th round pick. He definitely made the splashiest plays during the season, but as the summer progressed, drops were an issue. Route running was an issue. He had the thing on Sunday where he went on Instagram Live and started like cussing out a cop who gave him a ticket. He's a bit of a wild card off the field. So like, who knows with him? They said they punished him. They didn't say that. Well, we don't know what that punishment is. He is going to play. So, I mean, there's a chance that Javon Baker all of a sudden shows up and is like their big play option. But I don't know if he's going to see the field. So I feel better. Polk is the one that I'm excited to watch and that I feel like, we're going to be rewarded with actually producing.
How fast was the speeding ticket?
I don't know. He said he was issued a ticket after dropping somebody off at the airport, and then he went on Instagram and was like a lot of cussing and a lot of saying like, I don't. You work for me. I don't work for you. I'm a lot faster than you. I can outrun you. This kind of stuff. Just like calling out Massachusetts police by name. Like it wasn't great.
Not smart.
No. And this is a guy who, when he got drafted, he made the comment where we were like, what kind of player are the Patriots getting? And he was like, I make people in wheelchairs stand up, which it is what it is as a comment. I mean, I think it's funny, but I could see why some people didn't like it. But then he also went on Instagram and was barking about how there's no way that there are 10 receivers or however many receivers are drafted ahead of him. There's no way those guys are better than him. Of course, one of those guys is Jalen Polk.
Right.
So an unintentional shot, right? And so there's a little bit of then he had character concerns entering the draft. There's concern about his family. So it's one of those guys, right, that you got to kind of watch and see how it goes. But the talent's there. So he could be a lot of fun to watch if he plays.
Yeah. Sounds like self-awareness is an issue. So this game on Sunday, what you said with the offense, the defense, how do you see this upset being pulled if it is? If the Patriots can somehow come into Cincinnati and win as a 9-point underdog, how does this play out?
So I think, first of all, the reason why I'm ultimately, and I've thought about picking the Patriots all summer. I've wanted to pull the trigger just because, not because I think that highly of the Patriots or that low of the Bengals. I do, I know they've had slow starts. We've talked about this, away from the podcast. They've started slowly, like under Zach Taylor, and just in general, Week 1's a great time for upsets. I mean, the Patriots, nobody gave them a shot against the Eagles last year. They should have won that game. They blew it in the last minute. Obviously, different coaching staff right now, but a lot of teams aren't ready to go anymore in Week 1. So, I think the Patriots could have a shot there. But the reason I won't pick them is because I'd be assuming too much to say that they're not going to make a bunch of penalties on the offensive line. I don't know if Gerard Mayo is ready to manage a game at this level. Like, I just don't know. We haven't seen it. So that's too much of a guess. And then if the Patriots are going to win, it's going to have to be winning on the margins, right? Things like special teams where they've been really bad the last few years. And they have a new coordinator, Jeremy Springer. Like, how good is he? Is he going to have these guys in a position to make one of those plays that could swing the game? I just don't know because we haven't seen it. But if they are going to pull off the upset, I think it's because, number one, Jacoby Brissett doesn't make a catastrophic mistake, right? The Patriots were in a lot of games last year. As bad as they were in a lot of games, and a lot of those games were blown by missing a game-winning field goal or Mac Jones just imploding in the red zone. If you inject a little stability at quarterback, they probably win a few of those games. And so, I think Brissett gives them a chance maybe if this game is close. I think the Patriots have better weapons than they have in a while. It's still advantage Bengals defense, of course. But I still think the Patriots are going to be able to move the ball a bit, especially if they can run, as we were talking about earlier, and set up the play action shots. I think that's a recipe for success, but especially on defense, and why I do give them a shot in this game is, and I'm sure you guys, have been talking about the Jamar Chase thing. If he doesn't play, or if he just kind of fake plays, right, where he's out there, but he's not really seeing a ton of snaps, that obviously makes things a lot easier for the Patriots, right? Bill Belichick probably would have just doubled T. Higgins and let Christian Gonzalez run around. I don't know how Mayo will do it, but regardless, between Christian Gonzalez or the combination of Jonathan Jones and the safety, they could probably manage T. Higgins. I don't think they're afraid at all of Mike Gesicki. I don't think anybody in that building was sad to see Mike Gesicki go. And the Patriots' best position group is safety, so I think they're equipped to handle him. I think they're good enough up front defending the run, even without Barmore, that they should be okay. So I think they have a chance to keep the score low on defense. They have a good defense even without Judon and Barmore. And I think they match up pretty well if Chase isn't full go Jamar Chase in this game. If he is, that changes the math, obviously. But I think they have a chance to stay in the game. And then if they win, it's because, they just made a couple plays in crunch time and didn't make the catastrophic turnover that they've made too often the last 2 years.
All right. So having said all that, let's get your final score prediction for week one. Let's see how you think this game is going to play out. And then also, where do you see the Patriots finishing this season record wise and within the division? Do you think they'll overcome their, I think, what are they, 4.5? Is that their win total? Do you think they'll be above that, or where do you think they'll be in the division? But give us your week one score and where you think they'll be in the AFC East.
Score, I'll go 21-18 Bengals. I do think it's going to be a close game. I would be surprised if it gets away from the Patriots that badly. If it does, it will be because of penalties and sacks. So 21-18 Bengals. As for the Patriots record, before they lost Judon and Barmore, I had them at 7 wins with, if I was trending into bold prediction territory, I had them maybe getting to 8 or 9 just because stuff happens in the NFL. That doesn't mean they are an 8 or 9 win team. That means things happen. Big injuries happen. Teams puke on themselves in random weeks. But without those two guys, I definitely, I think 6 wins. I do think this team is better than people realize. A lot of question marks, a lot of variables. They're going to need a few of those variables to go their way. But, I think some of them will go their way because I think the talent's better than people realize. And I also just think we always, just as a population, always underestimate the variable of in-house players taking another step forward. And I think the Patriots have a lot of those candidates on the roster already, from Keon White, from Christian Gonzalez, to a Josh Uche if he returns to who he was before. A lot of these kind of guys all over the place, where if they sort of deliver on that, the Patriots could be a lot better than people realize. But still, a lot of that was predicated on them having an elite defense. And without Judon and Barmore, that's going to be tough. So I think 6 wins, last in the AFC East.
It makes sense. Their defense does give them such a high floor, but losing 2 of their best players is obviously going to have an impact. Dakota, thank you so much for joining us and giving us this preview of the Patriots. We're all excited for this week 1 game. We're excited for football to be back. Make sure you're reading all of Dakota's Patriots coverage at PFN, all of Jay's coverage at PFN. Everyone enjoy week 1. Enjoy football being officially back. We'll be back next week to recap all of week 1 action and go over this game. So until then, we'll talk to you next week.